Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For once, I don't need to thank the organizer for inviting me to give this talk. Nevertheless, I'm pleased to speak in this particular session on the institutional assessment of researchers. So I intend to cover a few things, to talk about the research incentive systems from the perspective of a researcher and from the perspective of institutions, because I'm a little bit of both, because I run a research lab and I also contribute to a bit of the administrative work in this university in relation to, particularly related to research. I will point out a few things about the current system of assessment, and I will try to suggest a few components that we could have in a supportive research culture for excellence. Don't forget that word about the quality of the research. So, let me see. In a university or in an institution, I learned a new word just very recently from a colleague of mine. The buzzword here in this part of the world, in Asia, is innovation and entrepreneurship. Researchers working in a university is essentially an academic entrepreneur. We try to secure our funding by applying for grant applications from external competitive agencies. So we try to get the funding. After we get the funding, we just do some of our research in our institution, and then we produce our research outcome. What counts are the research publications. Doesn't matter whether you are talking about quality or quantity. So you just become in the system of research is input of research grant, output of publications, and then you just engage in this business of entrepreneurship. Of course, if you're talking about a university in particular, one of the very important mission of a university is to train talents, the education aspect. So through the process of research, in fact, we train a lot of PhD students, postdoctoral fellows, and junior scientists. Nevertheless, in this organization, in this whole system of research, these other outcomes are not particularly looked at in a very serious manner. Everybody just contribute to this machinery of publication. So the university and the institution really become a factory. But we all know a lot about that. I think all of you know about this already. It's very clear. The incentive mechanism for research and the publication and the kind of outcome is actually very clear. There's no ambiguity at all. I like this particular publication and with this particular chart that really capture the sentiment very clearly. So everybody is striving for number or quality or quantity, quantity in terms of number, quality in terms of impact, or publication in high impact factor journals. And if you're at this end of the spectrum, you're successful. You get your job, you get your promotion, you get an increased pay. Of course, if you have publication, you get your research grant as well. So you could see it probably as also a progression of a career. If you're a young scientist, a young researcher, you probably start somewhere in the middle, depends on where you are, maybe even here. So in time, you will progress and you strive to publish in higher impact impact factor journals, and you also increase your productivity. If you're at this other end of the spectrum, obviously you're considered as failure. This applies to a researcher, but you can also look at it with a slightly broader perspective. You could also look at it as institutions as a whole. Some institutions are already at one end of the spectrum, so they are already having a very, very strong research output. They are being looked at as, with a high reputation. And if you're not at this end, if an institution is somewhere here, you will try to put in strategies so that you will be pushing the institution towards the more successful end of the spectrum. So essentially, this very, very clear incentive, as I said, in the way that I'm describing, is the so-called high-impact publications. I'm not going to define it very specifically, but it's understood that it's the key to success. You get jobs, you get your promotion, you get your various awards and distinctions. In this university, we have outstanding publication awards to as an incentive to encourage good quality publications. We have outstanding researcher awards. In fact, if you go out of this grand hall, go along the corridor, we have a kind of hall of fame. You will see the names of those people who got these awards with their name tag there. If you look carefully enough, you will even see my name somewhere there. So other than that, you get your research grant awards, and as you progress, the career progress, you achieve your recognition. And when you get the so-called international recognition through your publications, when you are known, then you are on a very good track of career progression. Your professorship is, along the way, paved the way, and you are really doing well. But that's at that end. At the other end, if you don't make it, then really, this is really creating a lot of pressure. So other than this type of incentive, there is also other kind. It's actually quite common practice in many institutions in the world that if for a particular institution you are somewhere on the left-hand side of the earlier spectrum that I show you, you're not particularly having very high number or quality of output yet, it is not uncommon to use a monetary incentive to stimulate, motivate your researchers to produce. And this is actually a summary of a study for China. And it summarizes a study of a long period of time of monetary reward for encouraging publication, particularly in Science, Nature, PNAS, or if it is in other lower quartile journals, in this case it's information science types of journals, you still get a reward, but it's slightly different. However, this is obviously some data that you can find in the public domain about China, but there are many other countries that I'm aware of who also use a monetary incentive mechanism, for example, in India or in Malaysia, as far as I know. Today, of course, China already put in a lot of really investment in research, in R&D investment. So therefore, the total volume of publication has risen tremendously over the last decades. And as Dr. Dai said yesterday in the opening plenary, he already said that in fact China is the second, ranked second in the total publication in the world. So therefore, those monetary incentive system from the institutions are already sort of withdrawing. It's no longer necessary to encourage research output in that way. So if you follow the progression of the research achievement, then we are already going into, so once you get that quantity out, so it's already getting into a phase of improving the quality of the research outcome, and it will be requiring some other type of incentives. So other than these that are the institutional incentive, in fact, South Africa, the South Africa Department of Higher Education and Training actually has sort of a institutional, government incentive, which is also a cash award to reward different types of publication accordingly. So therefore, it doesn't even need to go through the institutions. It's actually the organization that will do that. But of course, even so, even here, that while publication will earn a little bit of income to improve the income of the researcher, at the end of the day, if a place, a particular country, a particular institution really wants to achieve research and excellent research, the cash incentive is not really going to work at the end of the day. You only push people to go into predatory publishing and some other form. So one other point about the publication environment at the moment is that everybody wants to see positive research outcome. And of course, the speakers before me and some of the questions are already addressing that, is that there are a lot of effort in our research endeavor that through a very carefully worked out process, sometimes you do find negative results but are very variable. Of course, the clear example is, for example, in clinical trial and so on and so forth. However, I just really want to use this to illustrate a point about culture. Because all the journals, all the publications that we are producing want to see a positive, impressive, high-impact outcome. Therefore, it even affects the way that we design our study in the first place. The type of research questions that we ask, the design of the experiment to address those questions, if they are not going to yield a positive outcome, you don't even do it. Or if you've done it, you don't report that, you report the other half. So therefore, the impact, this culture of research and the research behavior, ultimately on the research and the research record, is really distorted. So this is again another very interesting study, talking about a survey of, I think, a couple of thousands of researchers who are churning out a paper every 5 days because they publish so much. So of course, there are very successful researchers who are really able to publish a lot. But if you look at this particular article here, indeed, when you are publishing with such high volume, there are issues of authorship and so on. So just summarizing a few things that are about high volume of publication. In fact, it leads to a series of questionable practices, including pushing people to publish in predatory journals, salami slicing, selective reporting, and really exposing the researchers, particularly young researchers, to risks of misconduct and questionable research practices. So what I said at the beginning in my talk is that we are talking about quality research, good quality research, and excellent research. So far, the incentive mechanism that I'm talking about, basically they're not really addressing the quality of the outcome. It is only about outcome and any outcome. So I want to go into a slightly different aspect to look into so-called the performance indicators for universities. Particularly in Asia, in this part of the world, we are very cautious about our world ranking. League tables. Institutions do chase after the league tables. And other indicators, of course, include our productivity in research. This could be number of publication and our citation, patents, the research income, and these days, even the research income that are from collaborative research with the industry also counts. And of course, awards and distinctions of the people, either of the professors and the students. All together, all of these added up to the reputations. So I'll show you a few things. So a few people actually already asked. These are the criteria. A summary of the various criteria is a little bit small for the three most popular ranking agencies. Academic ranking of world universities is the Shanghai Jiao Tong University ranking. The other one are the Times Higher and the QS. All three ranking agencies look at research outcome in terms of the number and the citation very seriously. What you see highlighted in the red dots, the red stars, are basically pointing out to the weighting that is put in the research outcome. Shanghai Jiao Tong University, this particular ranking, look very much at publication in Nature and Science. Of course, they look at the number of Nobel Prize a certain institution earned as well. So basically, in these world ranking, in the criteria, research outcome in terms of publication and citation occupy a lot of space. It would be nice if the processes of research, the care or in the institutional system that put into ensuring responsible research is put into this formula of ranking of universities. I think that would make a difference. Research assessment exercises, for some people, this is very, very familiar. For us, we're in Hong Kong. We are just in the middle of an exercise. It's the Hong Kong Research Assessment Exercise, organized by our University Grants Committee. It is due September this year. Last year in Australia, there was the Excellence in Research for Australia, administered by the Australian Research Council. And 2021 in the UK, there will be UK Research Excellence Framework, administered by the 4 UK higher education funding bodies, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. All of these funding agencies, in describing their aim, the purposes for the research assessment exercises, they are all along a similar line, maybe slightly different wording, but they're all along these lines. Encourage world-class research and drive excellence. They're really meant to be excellent framework for high-quality research outcome. Of course, it's also to review the strengths, and therefore, given these data, the institutions can develop research strategy. Last but not least, they are for allocating funding. Funding to the institutions and allowing the university to use this funding to strategize in which area they are going to strengthen or to build. I want to share with you our research assessment exercise is very much following the UK system. In the previous exercises, we only look at research output for the first time. We are including impact in the form of impact cases, and the research environment also contribute to some score. And the evaluation as such is that we are given stars, ranking 4 star, 3 star, 2 star, 1 star, or not to worry about it at all. So in this, some of you who are from the UK, you're already familiar because it's exactly the same way, although the distribution of the percentage is slightly different from your previous ref. So all of the evaluation, be it in the research output or impact or environment, will be evaluated given the stars. Funding is made according to a formula as how many stars you earn. The 4-star outputs, 4-star impact cases, 4-star research environment will be given so much more funding than 3-star. If it is 2-star, 1-star, or the others, no, 0. Okay, so it's a very clear formula, very clearly conveyed. So you can see, so it's the metric of the impact factor and all of that is one thing. When it comes to a grant agency, when it is translated into research assessment exercises for an institution to carry out, obviously it has an impact. So for the institution, you go through this process. You collect the publications of the researchers, you go through the assessment, you get a score. It will lead to funding, and it will lead to your reputation. And with the funding, of course, you can devise your strategy. You create jobs, you provide the research support. I have already talked about from the researcher's point of view. The publication, assessment, and score, you get your jobs, and you get your promotion and tenure. In fact, these two systems are very well aligned. If they are not aligned, the institution is likely to align them so that it will be aligned. So therefore, whatever the institution needs to deliver, the researchers are going to deliver together. So in a previous session, some of you asked about money. Actually, money is quite important in this whole picture. So really, it has quite a bit of things to do with the resource and the resource allocation. Well, I gave you 3 examples of research assessment exercises. In this particular conference, you are coming from all over the world. Many of your countries do not have research assessment. Somehow you suffer the same problem, right? You still have issues about incentives. We have a slightly different cultural distance. I just wonder whether this is is a matter of taste. So I show a little bit of light-hearted some examples. Can you see anything that are in common among these various types? Hamburger, salad, curry, anything that you can see? It's all delicious food. There is something in common. There is a certain assessment that is in common. They are all from Michelin star recommended restaurants. I don't really know how Michelin star awards are given. I believe it is peer review. It's by tasting. There is also certain quantitation. They have stars as well. Never mind. You do not need to go to the Four Seasons to taste some of these Michelin recommended cuisines. We are in Hong Kong. You can go to street stores, very easily affordable, small little restaurants. You could still enjoy these restaurants that are consistently earning these recognition. Now, the point I wanted to make is not about the assessment standard and how it is done. When you go into a restaurant that has this Michelin recommendation, you have a confidence that it cannot be that bad. You go to a restaurant that does not have a Michelin recommendation, you can enjoy very good food as well, right? So this standard and this assessment, I'm not so sure about is a matter of taste. It really is about, there is certain criteria that we could all work out and all of us could really take it really, confidently. So what is it though? What is it that will make it work? We know what doesn't work. I think this slide that I put in here, you know all of this already. The problems of the relying on the metrics, about research becoming just for the purpose of publishing and not for identifying problem and finding the truth. that publish or perish career advancement, and all of these things, all of the risks of questionable practices and so on. We all know that the metric system is not working. Moving away from it, I think many people tried, but we have a lot of suggestions. The Chinese Academy of Sciences is a very big organization, and they run a lot of institutions. Some years ago, this is an article in Nature published in 2015, reported that they use quantitative criteria for assessing the institutions. Even then, the CAS is already trying to adopt a peer review mechanism to review the institutions based on the strategic goals. As far as I know, many institutions worldwide also use peer review, every 5 years or every fixed period of time. It's not necessarily needing to depend on this type of RAE, research assessment exercises, to see whether your investment is worthwhile or accountable. So there's certainly alternatives, but what? So some of you already talk about the UK Nutfield Council had published this particular paper on how does high quality research look like, which carry these various characteristics. These are very good recommendations. And the metric tide, Frank already talked about it, mentioned it. So there is also a study, and they made recommendations on responsible metrics that should have some of these characteristics, but I'm not going to read it out. Some of you are probably already aware of it. These are recommendations. What is coming in front of us really is a little bit more about action. David just talked about the Hong Kong Manifesto. We are going to have 2 focus tracks allowing us to discuss a little bit more about the 5 principles for assessing researchers with a focus on research integrity. It is meant to be inclusive. It's not about sour grapes when you're not publishing in these high impact journals. It's really about including as far as possible the various components. But most importantly, when we are preparing the draft and so on, we really want to collect implementation examples and experience. And I will start by sharing with you our performance review in the University of Hong Kong. We have developed this academic performance portfolio for some years. Annually, every year, I have to fill in my APA. And we are a university, so of course we cover the teaching aspect. On the research, we talk about publications, research income, your editorship, if you have invited lectures, your knowledge exchange, your service and administration, if you are in the university, but your service to the professional bodies, all of this. Even David had mentioned a little bit about changing the CV. But I have to tell you, if you think that developing a portfolio will solve the problem of counting on the number of papers you publish and the citation, well, I have to tell you that it's not as simple as that. We have the APA, the portfolio system, for some time. We are only a little bit further than some of you, but in using it, in implementing it to translate it into promotion and tenure action, there is still a gap. I have a symbol of Tai Chi. Tai Chi is wonderful. You have a black spot in the white. You have a white spot in the black. So it's a balancing act. But if any of us who have successful examples of implementation, this is what we are calling for in the Hong Kong Manifesto. This is only a draft. We can all input into the wording of it, but sharing of successful example is what we are asking for. My title of my talk is Challenges, so I really have difficulty in giving you answers, but I have something that I think institutions can do, which is quality assurance of the research process, which it means is risks of misconduct, risks of questionable research practices is a risk. But you could always boost your immunity, that is, provide the training and increase the awareness. So all of this is indeed the responsibility of an institution that we should take care of looking after the research process and have a mechanism in place so that we have a check and balances, a health check, so to speak. And we must put the sufficient infrastructure support for the research, including if it is talking about data management systems and so on and so forth. Everybody asked the institution to do something about it. But I have to tell you, we can't. If the grant board, the grant agencies, the ranking agencies, the publishers, the government, if they are imposing, various things in the institution, it's not just about money. I really wanted to say, in terms of the research culture, we are all in it. Nobody is exempted from it. We are all in building and maintaining. If it requires changing, then change it. We are all there. Don't just ask your boss to change it, because actually we all need to contribute. So what would make a difference? Of course, we would like to see all of that, institutional and individual level of responsibility and commitment to trustworthiness of research, engagement in responsible conduct of research, fostering a supportive research environment for best practices, and so on. So this is where I would like to share. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mai Har, for adding so much more strong reasons to change the way we assess research and researchers. And thanks as well for bringing along the quality of restaurants. Yeah. That's really near to my heart. Thank you very much. Yeah. Other questions to be made? Someone is going to the microphone already. Yes, please go ahead, sir.
So it's the second time in the session that these university rankings come up, and they appear to be actually a major player, and there's not that many of them, so they could be like high yield targets for intervention. So shouldn't we be inviting them to this kind of conference? I mean, like the three or four most famous rankings, and maybe shouldn't we be working with them to build the Hong Kong the Hong Kong ranking of open science or whatever? I mean,
certainly. Yeah, we should really engage them. Indeed, in our, in discussing the program and so on. In fact, this is one of the topics that we would like to include. I think we are starting. If I'm correct, I think there are few people in the audience who are from ranking agencies. But maybe in the next conference, we can have a little bit more of a dedicated session on this.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for the talk. Very inspiring, at least brought me to the microphone. My name is Ted van Leeuwen from Leiden University, CWTS. We are a ranker. We have created a Leiden ranking. And for your information, the new Leiden ranking contains indicators on open science, open access uptake, and gender. So we try to, let me first say, I'm definitely against the use of rankings, but what we try to do is restore the idea that rankings can give you a certain ordering of the world. So what we try to add more information, and thereby you have different ways of looking at the world. What strikes me?
Question, please.
The question is, having heard the talks today yet, and all the work that has to be done to change the system, what about looking at the social science and humanities with getting into a situation of slow science rather than talking about creating less and less papers and all the pressure that comes with it? What's your opinion about that?
I think that we must engage the social scientists and researchers from the arts and humanities as an arena to be part of us as well. In developing the Hong Kong Manifesto, I have sent our draft, at least in our university, to all my colleagues in law, in social sciences. I have some input, but really it's about, we want very much to engage a broader scope of researchers, but they have to participate as well. So basically this is still ongoing. We are open to really engaging researchers who are engaged in broader type of work and output, so that we can really assess or reflect the work in an appropriate manner.
One last question, please go ahead.
Thank you. The Lancet has been mentioned before for the Lancet series on waste, and I'd like to mention now the Lancet special issue on advancing women in science, medicine, and global health. There was a lot of information there. There were a lot of proposals on how to fix many of these issues that we've been talking about. Specifically, what have you done to include more women in tenure and promotion, and how to, at least in my university, we have 30% associate professors are women, but 16% full professors. What is your experience on that?
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing it up. In our university, we have a Center for Gender Study, And indeed, the professor who is leading this particular initiative has this Hong Kong manifesto in her hands, and she has a lot of comment. So indeed, we are trying to put gender parity also into the overall picture. Obviously, I cannot give you a solution right away. I am rare in our university senior management, but we have a few women around in there, so I cannot offer you a simple answer. Rather, is to ask for participation for more women in this endeavor.
Thank you again, Mai Har. Thank you very much.